Gonzaga officially saw a third player enter the NCAA transfer portal in backup center Efton Reid. What does this mean for the Zags in the front court, and will the transfer party ever end?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome to the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Well, we continue our season in review series discussing every player on Gonzaga's roster. Unfortunately, the first three season in review episodes have also been transfer updates, as we have now had our third player enter the NCAA transfer portal. So today we're going to talk about Efton Reid's history, how he got here, how he ended up in the portal. We're going to use the second segment to discuss what this means for Gonzaga next year, who might step up, what they might do via the portal as well. And then we're going to close out the show talking about Efton Reid's future, where he might end up, what this means for him going forward. It's unfortunate that this is how these season in review episodes have continued to go. This is unprecedented for Gonzaga. I know people are feeling this right now. I know there's some strain, some panic, some frustration. I think the overall message that I had after we saw Hunter Sallis enter the portal is still kind of the same in the sense that this is sort of the new normal for college basketball, and so many high-profile programs are suffering similar fates. North Carolina is one that has, I think, had 5 players enter the portal. Indiana's had at least 4. Kansas, I believe, has had 5, and there's a similarity there. I think looking at the numbers of bench minutes, Gonzaga, I believe, finished 308th. I know they finished outside the top 300 in the total number of minutes played by their bench. I also know that North Carolina, for example, and Kansas were both lower than them. So you see a lot of high-profile teams, successful teams. I know North Carolina wasn't super successful last year, but overall quite successful as a program. And those programs tend to have really tight rotations. And there's a reason that Mark Few has always had a tight rotation. And I know there's been some criticism of that, including from yours truly. I don't think that he should be absolved from any of that criticism. But when you are a program that brings in as high level of talent as Gonzaga, either via the portal like Reid or through just normal recruiting like Harris, like Sallis, and you also play very few bench players, or you play them very few minutes compared to the rest of the NCAA, this is what's going to happen. And I think there can be a larger conversation about whether that's good or bad. And certainly Mark Few's track record of making the Sweet 16 and advancing far in the NCAA tournament indicates that he's obviously doing something right. But in this era, when players are more likely to leave and have more ability to do so without being punished and being penalized by the NCAA, you're going to see more of this. And I think part of that conversation can be, is how okay are you with that? And that's a decision that Mark Few and the staff have to make. It's not a decision for us to make. I think we all want to see players stay. We want to see guys play 3-4 years here and develop behind the scenes and kind of blossom in their second year or their third year or even their fourth year, as we have seen in the past with players like Rui Hachimura and players like Joel Ayayi and players like Corey Kispert and even Julian Strother to an extent. And some players are going to do that, and some players are going to choose to go somewhere else because they feel like maybe they thought they were going to get more playing time. Maybe they were told they were going to get more playing time, and situations changed, and so they want to move on. And I think that's just going to continue to happen. And it's not fun, and it's hard. And I think it's okay to feel frustrated about this, but I don't think this is some big indication that Mark Few's losing it or that Gonzaga's slipping away it's not anything that dramatic. It's a trio of players who we all saw how good they were. We know how talented they were, how highly they were respected by other programs and coming out of high school, and they didn't play as much as they almost certainly would have expected to. So it's not each individual situation, when you kind of look at it under a microscope, isn't that shocking, but it is tough to see 3 players enter the portal within a calendar week. That is, it's a tough pill to swallow. I understand that. For Efton Reid specifically, he originally committed to LSU out of high school. He was a 27th player in the class of 2021 after starring at IMG Academy in Florida. He is from Virginia, so very much an East Coast guy. Played 34 games at LSU, started all of them, only about 20 minutes per game, despite being a starter for that team. 6 points, 4 boards, just under a block per game. Came to Gonzaga after that season with some pedigree. Obviously, a top borderline top 25 player in his recruiting class. And the expectation when he first committed to Gonzaga, we didn't know what Drew Timme was going to do, and that was kind of an honorable thing, I think, for Reid to do, because a lot of other players, including Dawes Amack, including Jonai Broom, who went to Auburn, were players that chose not to come to Gonzaga, in part, we assume at least, because they didn't know the situation with Drew Timme. Reid made that commitment knowing full well, hey, I might not start next year. And that's what happened. Drew Timme came back. Anton Watson stepped into that starting role beautifully at the 4 spot, and Reid settled into a bench role. I think the expectation was that he was going to be the third big, and that's how the season started. He had 8 points and 8 rebounds against North Florida in the first game of the season. But by the Phil Knight Invitational, which is only a few weeks later, Ben Gregg had already passed him on the depth chart. And it wasn't even that Reid was playing really bad or anything. He wasn't playing great in the first few games, but you could see he was starting to put the pieces together. The offense was new to him. And as we started to see him kind of grow and develop, but Ben just passed him. That's really all that happened. Ben passed him on the depth chart, and I think deservedly so. Again, with no disrespect to Efton Reid, that's just what happened. And so then by that point, Reid's playing time eventually kind of just vanished. The only game he played more than 10 minutes after that point was against Eastern Oregon, which he had 16 points on 8 of 8 shooting, which was great, but it was against an NAIA school. After that, we just never really saw him. 4.6 minutes per game in 25 games total. 2 points, 1 rebound. He committed about a little over a foul per game in 4 minutes. I believe his extrapolated over a 40-minute game, he would average 9.5 fouls. And that was the biggest issue for him. He fouled out in 12 minutes against North Florida in that opening game. He committed 4 fouls in just 10 minutes against Michigan State. He committed 2 fouls in just 7 minutes against Texas. That's a huge issue for Reid, and part of the reason he didn't get as much playing time as he maybe could have. And that plus Ben passing him on the depth chart kind of just created the situation where Reid ended up getting kind of left behind from a playing time perspective. And for him to enter the portal now, we'll talk about it more in the third segment, but he didn't have a clear role next year either. We know Drew Timme's gone. We expect Anton Watson to be back. We do not know for sure on that situation. Perhaps Reid has an inkling in that regard. But if Anton's back and starts at the 5, Ben Gregg will start at the 4. The Zags are also likely pursuing other players in the portal, which we'll talk about momentarily. But it left Reid in a situation where all that, combined with Braden Huff being no longer redshirting and being a potential option for the Zags next year, I can see why Reid looked at this and thought, I don't want to be on the bench for another year. And I'd rather take my chances entering the portal, even though the expectation, barring a waiver, is that he will have to sit out the next season, which is a tough blow for Reid. It's an understandable rule by the NCAA, I think, and it'll kind of puts Reid in an interesting situation of deciding what he wants to do going forward. Well, the Zags already had to attack the backcourt via the transfer portal, and now they got some work to do on the block as well. More on that after a word from today's sponsor, FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That is bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Maybe you like Domantas Sabonis to keep putting up all-star, all-NBA, triple-double numbers for the Sacramento Kings. Maybe you like Zach Collins in his new role with the Spurs to keep up the high production. Maybe you want to make an exclusive bet like Corey Kispert hitting 2 threes in the first 3 minutes of Washington's next game. Lord knows he has been hitting them like crazy recently. Plus, FanDuel will even let you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags. And I want to thank all of you for making Locked On Zags your first listen of the day. For your second listen today, check out the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Myself and Isaac Shade, my co-host, we just did a way too early top 10 prediction for next season. We're going to talk all about the offseason transfer portal updates, NBA draft announcements, all sorts of good stuff. So check that show out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about what Efton Reid's decision to enter the transfer portal means for Gonzaga, and then we'll close up the show talking more about what it means for him and what his potential options might look like via the portal. Efton leaving very obviously clears a spot for Gonzaga in their front court. We talked about this in the first segment. The expectation is that the presumed starting lineup for next season includes Anton Watson and Ben Gregg at the 5 and the 4. This is with the assumption that Anton Watson returns for his 5th year, his COVID year of eligibility, and stays in Spokane. We have not heard any strong indication that there is anything else he would do. He could try his hand at a professional career. I think it makes sense for him to come back, have more of a featured role as Gonzaga's low post scoring option, and potentially try to use that to boost his NBA stock, or at least his overseas stock if the NBA stock never really develops. I don't see any reason why Ben Gregg would leave. That would be a stone cold stunner, quite honestly, based on how he has developed in this program and the expectation for his role next year. Braden Huff is going to at least fill a role. The Zags did not bring him in to never play in this program. We didn't see any of him last year except at the craziness in the kennel, which doesn't really tell us much about him. He was a top 100 recruit, Mr. Illinois in the state of Illinois. So I think a player that certainly has the ability to impact this program. And we're just kind of unsure what that might look like. Speaking of uncertainty in the front court, Kaden Perry, huge question mark right now for the Zags, a guy who has not played pretty much at all in the last 2 years, very sparingly in his first year. Significant back injury suffered in high school, some ankle, foot injuries that he's suffered since then. Very unfortunate start to his collegiate career. A guy who could be an impactful rebounder, an impactful low post scorer, an impactful rim protector if he is at full strength. We just don't know if that is something that is going to happen this year or if it is something that is ever going to happen for Kaden Perry at this point. Beyond that, as if there's not enough uncertainty in the front court, Gonzaga is bringing 2 players in next year. South Korean Jun Seok Yeo, who is a 6'8" kind of stretch 4 combo 3 type player, a little bit Julian Strother-esque. We haven't seen a ton of him other than what he has done in the FIBA tournament when he was 19, which was excellent. He looked fantastic. How that translates to this level remains to be seen. There's a lot of optimism behind the scenes that Yeo is going to be a big-time contributor for Gonzaga next season. I expect that to happen more on the wing, but there's a chance Mark Few tries to opt into a small ball 4 role with him if they think that that's where he's going to fit better. Similar conversations surrounding NBA Global Academy player Alex Toohey from Australia, another kind of stretch 4 type player. Whether they use him in that role or not kind of remains to be seen. Regardless, this also creates a situation where Gonzaga could add to the front court via the transfer portal. And there are some big names right now available via the portal. We already discussed Kel'el Ware on a recent episode of Locked On Zags. You can go find it in your feed if you haven't done so yet. We discussed Dawes Amack in a even further back episode. This was during the NCAA tournament when Amack entered the portal out of Texas Tech. We discussed what that might look like for him, a player who had already had significant interest from Gonzaga coming into last season before he ended up going to Texas Tech. Graham Ike from Wyoming is absolutely an option here as well. A guy who didn't play last year but averaged 19 and 10 the year before that. Hunter Dickinson, I don't think he's coming to Gonzaga, but if we're talking about big names in the transfer portal, you got to talk about Hunter Dickinson, a guy who I think is going to go to the highest bidder possible in terms of NIL. Olivier Nakamura from Virginia is another big name the Zags could pursue in the transfer portal as well. A few smaller names, there's tons of them out there, so these are just a handful that kind of stood out to me as potential options. Ismail Masad from Kansas State, he's more of a stretch 4 outside shooter type, had a really nice tournament for the Wildcats alongside Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson. Will Baker from Nevada and Jason Spurgeon from Southern Utah are a pair of other options the Zags could pursue there as well. We know the Zags are going to be very involved in the guard room for the transfer portal because they lost Hunter Sallis, they lost Dominick Harris, they lost Rasir Bolton. We don't know the future of Malachi Smith. So I think right now, my guess is that Mark Few and Stephen Gentry and Brian Michelson and Roger Powell and whoever else on their staff helps kind of do transfer portal stuff and reaches out to players. They're probably focused on the guard room. They're probably focused on some of those players that we've also talked about on previous episodes, Steel Venters from Eastern Washington, Taron Armstrong from Cal Baptist, et cetera, et cetera. But right now we know the Zags have at least 2 open scholarships. Drew Timmy's gone, Rasir Bolton's gone, Dominick Harris is gone, Hunter Sallis is gone, Efton Reid is gone. That is 5 players out the door Alex Toohey, Dusty Stromer coming in. That is 2. So actually they have 3. Excuse me. My math, it's been a long month. Math is a little off right now. 3 open scholarships as of right now. Again, I expect the priority to be the backcourt, but there's a very good chance they look to add at least something in the front court, whether it's a high profile instant plug and play starter, the way that Amac or Graham Ike or Kelly Ware would be, whether it's a more of a reserve option, somebody who can just kind of give them minutes off the bench, assuming Watson and Gregg are back. They have a couple different options that they could pursue there, but it's hard for me to imagine that they don't go fairly aggressively towards finding somebody to add in the front court, just because, I mean, again, the uncertainty, we kind of already talked about it. Anton Watson, I think, is a player you can pretty much rely on to be a starting center, 30 minutes per game. He's going to be fine. He's an elite defensive player. His low post efficiency around the rim is great. The stretchability hasn't really showed up, although it's worth pointing out he shot 33% from 3 last year, which is still not great, but is much better than he had done throughout his career up to that point. I think Ben Gregg is a solid addition. Can he give you 30 minutes per game? I think that's a question you have to answer, or you have to be weary of. He showed fatigue at times last year and did not play 30 minutes a game. He played more like 12, 15, 18 minutes per game, but you would see him get gassed and have to come out of the game. Working on your conditioning and getting to the point where you can play more minutes is absolutely something Ben is capable of doing. And just the growth that he had physically from last year to this year was tremendous. You could see it just looking at him, that he got stronger, he got leaner, he got more athletic. I don't have any reason to doubt that he's capable of continuing to do that. But that, if that's your starting group, you definitely want some assurance behind them. And right now the Zags do not have that. Braden Huff is not that. He might become that. He might be, by the time October rolls around and we see him at Craziness, we might be like, oh, never mind, he's that. He's ready to be that guy. But right now, we don't know that he's that. Kaden Perry, again, complete question mark. And then the 2 incoming guys, not really post necessarily. So I think the Zags have to make a move here. They have to strike for something. I don't think they necessarily need to go after one of the biggest names, but I've said this on the show before, and I'll continue to say it. Why not strike for the best you can possibly get? The ramifications of that are what we are seeing right now, which is you bring in the highest profile players you can, or not, maybe not highest profile, you bring in the best players that you can, the players you perceive are the best via the portal for your team. And if that creates log jams at certain spots, you might have players enter the portal. This is what happened last year. Hunter Sallis came in. Shortly after that, Rasir Bolton committed. Shortly after that, Nolan Hickman decommitted from Kentucky, ended up coming to Spokane. All of a sudden, Hunter Sallis didn't have as much playing time as he would have expected. Rasir Bolton ended up returning for a second year. Malachi Smith transferred in. All of a sudden, Sallis doesn't get that playing time in year 2. And I get why that was frustrating for him and why he chose to leave. But I also see for Gonzaga, like, you have to try to go get the best players you can. You had to assume that Rasir Bolton wasn't going to come back. You had to treat it as such. And then when he did, it created a logjam in that spot. I think the Zags are going to do something similar in the front court. They have to assume, even if you assume Watson and Gregg are coming back, you assume Braden Huff and Kaden Perry are potentially there for you. You have to go add assurance to that. You have to. And if that creates a situation next year where Braden Huff still doesn't get in the playing time, and maybe, I'm not going to make any predictions about what he might do in the future, but you have to be willing to take that risk. Let me put it that way. You have to be willing to bring in as many talented players as you can convince to come to your program, and then put the pieces together after that. That has to be the way that you approach this. It has to be. And it's going to create more situations like this going forward. And that sucks. It sucks to see players leave via the transfer portal. I feel it. You feel it. Everybody feels it. This is unusual. It's unprecedented. And it is a little distressing. But the alternative of not pursuing talented players in the portal because you don't want to alienate the players you already have is not necessarily an option either. There has to be a balance. There has to be a balance. Right now, the Zags might be imbalanced. It's very possible that they're a little too imbalanced, a little too aggressive, a little too willing to make promises to players about playing time that they can't hold up. And maybe they are making mistakes in that regard. It wouldn't shock me if that's happening. And then you have to dial it back. You have to reassess. You have to figure out, how do we change this so that this doesn't continue to happen? We can't continue to, and this is so new to everybody. And I think that's such an important part of this to remember. This is new. The transfer portal players being able to leave like this, Gonzaga getting 5-star recruits, all of that is new. All of that has happened in the last half decade of Mark Few's career. So of course it's a learning curve. And of course it's creating situations that are maybe uncomfortable or unfamiliar for Gonzaga players and coaches and fans. But that doesn't mean it's not going to eventually get the ship right, and they're eventually going to figure out how to do this in a way that is most advantageous for the program, for the players, for everybody. But right now, we're just kind of in that sticky, uncomfortable period until we get that figured out. So what does this mean for Efton Reid? That's the biggest question, because we're still doing our season in review series, and part of the season in review series is looking at the player's future. In this case, Efton Reid's future is not in Spokane. We think, could he come back? All of that and more coming up right after this. All right, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still locked on Zags, and we're going to close out the show talking about the Efton Reid of it all. Not what this means for Gonzaga, not what this means overall in terms of transfer portal, NIL, all of the kind of overarching conversations that decisions like this make. We're talking about Efton Reid, because I think Efton Reid is still going to be a highly sought after transfer despite limited playing time last year. He has pedigree. You don't just not become a top 30 prospect in your recruiting class. I mentioned with Dominick Harris that I'm not sure how much his previous pedigree is going to matter in the transfer portal. And part of that is because he's farther removed from being a high school player, and he wasn't as highly regarded. He was still a top 75, I think, top 60 recruit by most of those major outlets. Efton Reid was top 30, and he started 34 games for an SEC program in his first season. So I think that there's still going to be some interest. I also think that some of that interest is going to be a bit more tepid than it was last offseason, for example. His inability to stay on the court because of foul trouble is going to be a red flag for other teams looking at him via the portal. I think that there's still a lot to love here. Efton Reid as a person, he seems like a wonderful kid, very enthusiastic, energetic, works really hard. I think all of that stuff matters tremendously, significantly. And I think it's going to help programs who maybe are a little bit more weary of his production last year and how much he's going to help them. I think that programs will overlook some of that because they know, hey, this is a kid who's going to come in here and work his butt off. He's going to be good in practice. He's going to be good for team morale, for locker room stuff. I think that that helps him significantly. I also think him having to sit out is a tough blow. And this is just the expectation. I don't know what waiver he would be able to get, but the NCAA is wildly unpredictable with waivers. Wildly unpredictable. There's a chance that while they have instilled this rule that says you cannot transfer twice without sitting out a year or getting a waiver, there's a chance the NCAA will instill that rule and then just give waivers to everybody. They have done it before. That is not unusual. I don't know what the reasoning to this day. I don't know what the reasoning for Andrew Nembhard getting cleared to play after transferring from Florida to Gonzaga. I am so happy that he did, because the Zags do not make that national championship run without him. But there was not a lot of rhyme or reason to that specific decision, unless I missed something, in which case let me know. But generally, some of these waivers seem to kind of be a bit arbitrary. Efton Reid, if you were to transfer closer to home, say that he's homesick, and I'm not trying to say this is like cheating or anything like that, go apply for your waiver, go try to get it. Why not? I hope he can play next year for his sake. I think that would be great for him. But if he does, go closer to home and apply for a waiver that way, I think the NCAA might grant it. But if not, him having to sit out after not playing much this year, that is a bummer, and something that I think he has to consider heavily, to the point where you could come back to Gonzaga and you don't have to sit out. I don't want to make any indication that I have heard anything or have any inside information about this. No idea. Efton Reid might enter the portal with 0% indication that he's going to come back to Spokane. It might be completely off his radar, but it might not. It might not. And if I'm the coaching staff, I think that's got to be part of the sell. Like, come back here and you will play next year. But I just don't know how much they can promise that. I also don't know if Efton is hearing that Anton Watson is coming back. I don't know if Efton is hearing that the Zags are pursuing players in the portal. I don't know any of that. Again, I don't want to speculate on that necessarily, because maybe it's not a factor for him at all. It might not be a factor for him at all. It's one of those things where we just don't really know. I do think that the Zags are going to try to get him back. I just don't know if that's going to work or not. In terms of where he might go, he's hard to predict right now. A lot of programs were invested in him heavily before he committed to LSU, and we're talking really high-profile programs: Rutgers, Michigan, Georgetown, North Carolina State, Kansas, Michigan, Louisville, Ohio State. Those are just a few. Virginia was in on him as well, and he's kind of local to that area. I think he's still going to get interest from Power 5 programs. It's hard for me to imagine that he doesn't. Are those programs going to be interested in plugging him in as a starter right away? Probably not. Maybe some lower level Power 5 programs might. Washington State, if you wanted to stay local to the area, is a program that lost their starting center, Deshaun Jackson, to the transfer portal. I think there's a chance they could try to convince Efton Reid to come in and play significant minutes right away. That's assuming he gets a waiver approved, or at least he would sit for a year and then kind of become their starting center after that. I also think, and I hate saying, I hate that I have to defend that this isn't me being insulting, because it's not at all. But I do think that there's a chance that Efton Reid could really thrive if he were to play at the mid-major level next year, the non-Gonzaga mid-major level, I should say. Programs like Iona, who have lost a significant amount of their players to the transfer portal because of the Rick Pitino effect, where he took the best players from Iona and brought them over to St. John's, or other players are just entering the portal because they don't want to play for not Rick Pitino. VCU, similar situation. Tons of their players have entered the portal after their coach left for a different job. Nevada has lost a handful of players to the transfer portal as well, including a couple of bigs. So there are some mid-major programs, some very good mid-major programs in high-level conferences that I think Efton Reid, again, depending on the waiver situation, would play there right away and play big minutes and start potentially. And there's NBA scouts discover you if you play at a mid-major. Like, you're not hidden. You don't vanish if you play at that level. So I think there's some appeal there potentially for Reid if you wanted to do it. But I also think that, again, a lot of Power 5 programs are going to be invested here. They just might not be invested in him as a immediate starter. So that's kind of the question, the decision that Reid has to make at this point. And it's not an enviable one. I'm excited to continue to track what happens to these guys. It's sad to see Dominick Harris and Hunter Sallis and Efton Reid all enter the portal. It's obviously tough for Gonzaga fans. I know we're all feeling this right now, but I'm excited to see where they end up. I'm excited to see how Gonzaga potentially replaces those players in the portal. And that's what we're going to talk about in future episodes. Next episode, we're talking transfer portal additions. We're going to focus more on the front court, because now we have an addition that we need to make in the front court because of the Efton Reid departure. So look for that later this week. We're, of course, going to continue our season in review series going into next week as well. Hopefully not all of these are going to end with us talking about the player transferring. We'll, of course, have season in review episodes for the players like Drew Timme and Rasir Bolton, who are ending their collegiate careers as well. So stick with us. Locked On Zags, available wherever you get your podcasts, available on YouTube as well. That is going to do it for me today. So once again, thank you all for listening, and go Zags.